The hunt for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, just took a sharp, confusing turn in the Arizona desert. A local Pima County deputy was arrested on kidnapping charges, sending shockwaves through Tucson and leaving a desperate family wondering if the predator was wearing a badge all along. But as the investigation deepens, experts are warning that the truth might be even more disturbing than we realized. Stick around because we're breaking down the evidence that just surfaced. Subscribe to the February report for the latest updates on this developing case. To understand why the arrest of a Pima County Sheriff's deputy felt like a lightning bolt to this case, you have to look at the sheer void of information the Guthrie family has been living in since February 1st. Nancy Guthrie didn't just vanish. She was snatched from her sanctuary in the Catalina Foothills. This is an 84-year-old grandmother, described by her children as sharp as a tack, but physically fragile. She relies on a pacemaker and critical daily medication. When she didn't show up for her regular virtual church service that Sunday morning, the alarm bells didn't just ring, they screamed. The initial scene at her home was chilling. Investigators found a trail of blood on the front porch. DNA tests quickly confirmed it was Nancy's. There were signs of forced entry, but the most haunting piece of evidence came from her own technology. At 1:47 a.m., her doorbell camera was manually disconnected by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. They wore gloves, they wore a mask. They were a shadow in the night. Then, at 2:28 a.m., the monitoring app for her pacemaker went silent. It missed its scheduled transmission, suggesting that by that time, Nancy was either out of range or something catastrophic had happened to the device's ability to communicate. For over a month, the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI have been chasing ghosts. They've looked at ransom notes, some real, some cruel hoaxes. They've analyzed a black Ozark Trail backpack seen on camera, a specific model sold at Walmart. They've cleared her family, her son-in-law Tommaso Cioni, and every close associate. And then the news broke. Travis Reynolds, a 22-year-old Pima County deputy, was in handcuffs. The charge? Kidnapping. The public reaction was immediate. If a deputy in the very department leading the search was a kidnapper, the entire investigation was compromised. People started pulling up the doorbell footage, comparing the Porch Guy to Reynolds' mugshot. The height seemed to match. The build seemed to match. The internet was convinced the monster had been hiding in plain sight, potentially using his badge to bypass security or monitor the very investigation meant to catch him. It was the kind of twist that keeps a community awake at night, wondering who they can actually trust when the person they call for help might be the person they should be running from. But as the dust settled on the Reynolds arrest, a much more nuanced and perhaps more frustrating reality began to emerge. The details of the charges against Travis Reynolds are stomach-turning, but they paint a picture of a very different kind of criminal than the one who took Nancy Guthrie. Reynolds wasn't arrested for a calculated middle-of-the-night home invasion. He was arrested for an alleged predatory assault while on duty. According to official reports, Reynolds was transporting a female arrestee to the Pima County Jail on March 19th. During that transport, he reportedly called her hot and a MILF. Once they arrived at the jail, instead of following protocol, he allegedly moved her handcuffs from the back to the front, climbed into the back of the patrol vehicle with her, and shared a vape pen. He then allegedly offered to help with her case in exchange for sexual favors at a hotel, and showed her explicit videos on his phone, videos that appeared to feature himself. When you look at that behavior, it's the definition of a sexual deviant who preys on those he has power over, as former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer put it. He wanted easy prey, someone already in the system, someone he thought wouldn't be believed. That is a massive departure from the Porch Guy, who targeted a high-profile 84-year-old woman in a secure neighborhood. Experts like Coffindaffer have been vocal about why Reynolds likely isn't our guy. First, there's the modus operandi, the MO. The Guthrie kidnapper was a ghost. He disabled security systems, wore specialized gear, and has managed to stay ahead of the FBI for nearly 2 months. Reynolds, by contrast, was incredibly sloppy. He allegedly committed his crimes inside a tracked patrol vehicle, at a jail facility, in front of a victim who was already being processed into the legal system. Then there's the physical evidence. When experts look at the Porch Guy footage, they look at the gear. The holster and the sidearm seen on the suspect in the Guthrie video don't match the standard issue equipment Reynolds would have been carrying as a deputy. Even the choice of victim doesn't align with Reynolds' alleged pattern. He was targeting women he viewed as hot or soccer mom types. Nancy Guthrie, while a beloved and lovely grandmother, doesn't fit the profile of the easy prey a 22-year-old predator like Reynolds was looking for. This brings us to a frustrating crossroads. If it's not the deputy, then who is it? The investigation is now pivoting back to the specialized items found at the scene. The FBI is hyper-focused on that Ozark Trail 25-liter hiker pack. They've been scouring Walmart purchase records across the Southwest, looking for anyone who bought that specific bag, alongside a very specific type of black mask and gloves in the weeks leading up to January 31st. We also have the issue of the ransom notes. Early in the case, several media outlets received Bitcoin demands totaling $6 million. The FBI confirmed that at least one of these was a cruel hoax by someone trying to profit from the family's pain, leading to a separate arrest. But other notes contain details that hadn't been made public, references to a specific floodlight and an Apple Watch Nancy was wearing. This suggests the kidnapper is either communicating or someone very close to the investigation is leaking. The emotional toll on the Guthrie family is reaching a breaking point. Savannah Guthrie has been off the air for weeks, staying in Tucson to coordinate with investigators. The family has offered a $1 million reward for her safe return. But as every day passes, the proof of life they so desperately need remains elusive. There have been no phone calls, no recent videos, just a silence that is becoming increasingly deafening. In our next breakdown, we're going to look at the Rio Rico connection, a lead that took investigators south toward the border, and why some believe this wasn't a random act of violence, but a targeted hit with a very specific motive. The deputy might be a monster, but he might not be this monster, and that means the real threat is still out there. The chilling reality of what happened inside that Catalina Foothills home starts with a timeline that is down to the minute. On Saturday, January 31st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie had dinner with her daughter Annie and son-in-law Tommaso Cioni. It was a normal family evening. Tommaso dropped her off at approximately 9:48 p.m., and the garage door closed 2 minutes later. That was the last time a loved one saw her. What happened next is a masterclass in predatory calculation. At 1:47 a.m., a figure appeared on the doorbell camera, masked, gloved, and carrying a black backpack. They didn't just ring the bell, they systematically disconnected the device. This wasn't a smash and grab. This was an extraction. Inside the house, investigators found signs of forced entry and, most disturbingly, drops of blood near the entrance that DNA later confirmed belonged to Nancy. But for the Guthrie family, the most terrifying piece of evidence isn't physical. It's digital. Nancy's pacemaker, a device she depends on to stay alive, stopped communicating with her iPhone at approximately 2:12 a.m. In modern medicine, these devices sync via Bluetooth to a phone nearby. The fact that the phone was left behind but the signal vanished suggests that by 2:12 a.m., Nancy was either being moved out of the house or the device itself had suffered a catastrophic failure. For Savannah Guthrie, this isn't just a news story. It's a living nightmare that has forced her to step away from her career, including her planned coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics. In an emotional interview just days ago, Savannah pushed back against the cruel and irresponsible online theories targeting her own family. She made it clear no one cared for her mother more than Annie and Tommaso, but she also admitted to a haunting thought that her brother, Cameron, first voiced, that her own fame and wealth might have put a target on their mother's back. It's a heavy burden to carry, the idea that a successful career in the public eye could lead a predator to the doorstep of an 84-year-old woman who just wanted to watch her Sunday morning church service. As the investigation enters its second month, the focus has shifted from the immediate crime scene to a broader, more complex web of digital and physical clues. The FBI and Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos have been navigating a minefield of potential leads, including multiple ransom notes sent to media outlets like TMZ and CNN. While one note was quickly debunked as a heartless hoax, others have contained details that only someone with inside knowledge, or the kidnapper themselves, would know. One note claimed Nancy was alive but scared and warned that it would be the only communication the family would receive. The pressure on the Pima County Sheriff's Department is immense, and it's only been amplified by the arrest of one of their own. When Deputy Travis Reynolds was taken into custody, the public immediately tried to bridge the gap between his alleged crimes and Nancy's disappearance. Reynolds is accused of a horrifying abuse of power, allegedly kidnapping a female detainee in his patrol car and demanding sexual favors. While he has been fired and faces a $200,000 bond, investigators have been quick to state that there is currently no verified link between Reynolds and the Guthrie case. However, the Rio Rico lead continues to simmer in the background. Rio Rico is a small community south of Tucson, closer to the Mexican border, and sources indicate that license plate readers and cell tower pings may have placed a vehicle of interest in that area shortly after Nancy vanished. If the kidnapper headed south, it changes the entire profile of the suspect. We're no longer looking at a local deviant. We're looking at someone with the logistics and the will to transport an elderly woman through one of the most monitored corridors in the United States. The question remains, was this a professional hit or a snap decision by an amateur who realized halfway through that they had taken someone far more high profile than they intended? Let's talk about the human cost of this silence. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is a woman of deep conviction and a grandmother who, despite her physical limitations, remains a pillar of her family. Every day that passes without her medication is a day where the physiological red zone becomes more dangerous. Experts have pointed out that at her age and with her heart condition, the stress of an abduction alone is enough to be fatal. This isn't just a search for a missing person. It's a race against a biological clock that is winding down. The Guthrie family has put up a $1 million reward, hoping that money will talk where conscience hasn't. They are begging for proof of life, a video, a photo, anything to show that Nancy is still with us. Savannah's brother Cameron has been the family's rock, but even he has had to confront the reality that this might not have a happy ending. Imagine the pain of sitting in a house where your mother's blood was found on the porch, staring at a disconnected doorbell camera, and knowing that the last thing she likely saw was a masked stranger standing over her bed. This community in Tucson is on edge. The Catalina Foothills is a place where people go for peace and security. Now, neighbors are obsessively checking their own security footage, looking for a black backpack or a suspicious car from that early Sunday morning. The fear is that if someone can be taken from a home like Nancy's, a home with security, a home in a safe neighborhood, then no one is truly secure. The Porch Guy didn't just take Nancy, he took the sense of safety from an entire city. The investigation is currently at a critical pivot point, with the Reynolds arrest being treated as a separate, albeit disturbing matter of police misconduct. The FBI is returning to the physical evidence found at the Guthrie residence. They are looking at the black Ozark Trail backpack seen in the footage, a specific 25-liter hiker pack sold at major retailers. They are looking for a buyer who fits a very specific profile, someone comfortable with technology, someone who knew the layout of the Catalina Foothills, and someone who may have been stalking Nancy in the days leading up to the abduction. Sheriff Nanos has been careful with his words, but his early assessment remains the guiding light of this case. I believe she was abducted. She didn't go willingly. The fact that her iPhone was left behind is a classic sign of a kidnapper trying to eliminate GPS tracking. But in 2026, you can't just disappear. There are license plate readers on the highways, private ring cameras on every third house, and digital footprints that are nearly impossible to erase entirely. The FBI is reportedly working with specialized units to analyze the ransom notes for linguistic fingerprints, patterns in writing that might reveal the kidnapper's education level, location, or even their identity. They are also re-interviewing everyone Nancy had contact with in the weeks prior. Was there a delivery driver? A maintenance worker? Someone who saw her fragility and her daughter's fame and saw an opportunity? We are entering the most dangerous phase of a kidnapping investigation, the period where the perpetrator starts to feel the walls closing in. The shadow cast by the arrest of Deputy Travis Reynolds has forced the Pima County Sheriff's Department into a defensive crouch at the exact moment they need to be on the offensive. Sheriff Chris Nanos, while distancing his department from the disgraced deputy, is facing a community that is now double-checking their locks and their trust in the badge. Reynolds, just 22 years old, wasn't some seasoned veteran. He was a young officer who allegedly saw the power of his uniform as a tool for predation. The specifics of the case against Reynolds are a haunting distraction from the search for Nancy Guthrie. On March 19th, while the entire department was supposedly hyper-focused on the highest-profile kidnapping in Arizona history, Reynolds was allegedly using a patrol vehicle as a private chamber for assault. He is accused of taking a female detainee, sharing a vape pen with her, and then keeping her in the vehicle for an extended period at the jail entrance while demanding sexual favors in exchange for help with her case. The sheer brazenness of doing this at the jail, under the eyes of surveillance cameras that ultimately caught parts of the encounter, points to a predator who felt untouchable. While investigators and former FBI experts like Jennifer Coffindaffer insist there is no verified link between Reynolds and the Guthrie abduction, the timing is a public relations catastrophe. The Porch Guy, seen in the FBI's released footage, was described as having an average build, standing between 5'9" and 5'10", measurements that could easily fit a young man like Reynolds. However, the gear is where the theories fall apart. The suspect at Nancy's door was carrying a holster and a sidearm that did not match the standard issue equipment for a Pima County deputy. More importantly, the suspect was wearing a very specific 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker backpack, a detail the FBI has used to track retail purchases across the Southwest. Reynolds may be a predator, but the Porch Guy appears to be a specialist. In an emotional interview with Hoda Kotb that aired just days ago, Savannah Guthrie opened up about the unbearable guilt that has been eating at her since February 1st. She spoke of a conversation with her brother, Cameron, who has a military background and was the first to suggest that Nancy hadn't just wandered off. She had been targeted. Savannah asked him the question that haunts every person in the public eye. "Do you think it's because of me?" His response was a heartbreaking, "I'm sorry, sweetie, but yeah, maybe." The details Savannah revealed about the state of her mother's home add a new layer of terror to the case. When family members arrived, they didn't just find a missing person. They found a crime scene that looked like it had been prepared for an extraction. The back doors of the house were found propped open, a classic tactic to ensure a quick exit or to manage the movement of a victim who might struggle. Nancy's purse and phone were left behind, eliminating the possibility that she had gone for a walk or left voluntarily. "I brought this to her bedside," Savannah said, her voice cracking as she addressed her mother directly. "I am so sorry, Mommy. This isn't just a news anchor reporting on a tragedy. This is a daughter grappling with the idea that her success might have been the catalyst for her mother's suffering." The FBI has received over 13,000 tips since releasing the doorbell footage, but so far, the masked man remains a digital ghost. The family's $1 million reward remains unclaimed, a sign that the person or persons involved are either incredibly disciplined or that the circle of people who know the truth is dangerously small. The investigation has recently pivoted back to the Rio Rico lead, a small community south of Tucson that serves as a gateway toward the Mexican border. Sources indicate that investigators are looking into a specific vehicle of interest that was captured on highway license plate readers heading south in the early morning hours of February 1st. This move toward the border suggests a level of sophistication and logistical planning that moves the case away from a local crime of opportunity and towards something far more organized. Former agents have pointed out that if Nancy was taken toward the border, the kidnappers would have needed a way to manage her medical needs. Nancy Guthrie is 84 and depends on a pacemaker and daily medication. Any prolonged abduction without medical intervention is a high-risk gamble for the kidnappers. This leads to a chilling theory. Is she being held in a location with medical access, or was the kidnapping a snatch and grab that went wrong the moment her pacemaker app went silent at 2:12 a.m.? Sheriff Nanos has maintained a public stance of cautious optimism, recently stating that his team is definitely closer than they were a month ago. A dedicated homicide unit is now working alongside the FBI, a move that signals the gravity of the physical evidence, specifically the blood found on the porch. They are operating under the assumption that Nancy is alive, but the lack of a proof-of-life video or a consistent, verifiable ransom demand has left many wondering if the kidnappers are even in control of the situation anymore. For Savannah Guthrie, the return to work on April 6th is more than a career move. It is a desperate attempt to reclaim a sense of normalcy in a world that has been shattered. She told Hoda Kotb that "joy will be my protest," a statement that has resonated with millions of Today Show viewers who have been following the case. She spoke of a moment of spiritual clarity where she felt she heard God telling her, "You do know where she is. She's with me." It was a moment of peace in a storm of uncertainty, though it didn't provide the factual answers the FBI is still hunting for. The case of Nancy Guthrie is a reminder of the vulnerability of our elderly and the terrifying reach of those who would exploit fame for profit. As Tucson waits for the next update from the FBI, the focus remains on that 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack and the man who wore it. Was he a lone predator, part of a ring, or someone who knew the Guthrie family's schedule down to the minute? The investigation is entering a silent phase, often the precursor to a major breakthrough or a long, cold trail. The sudden arrest of Travis Reynolds has left the Pima County Sheriff's Department in a state of internal crisis while the world watches to see if the Guthrie case will finally break. Reynolds, now facing a $200,000 bond, represents a terrifying breach of public trust. But for investigators, the challenge is separating his predatory actions from the sophisticated abduction of Nancy Guthrie. While the Porch Guy and Reynolds share a general physical profile, standing around 5'10" with an average build, the behavioral evidence tells two different stories. Reynolds allegedly sought out vulnerable women already in the legal system, using his badge as a weapon of coercion in a sloppy, traceable manner. The Guthrie kidnapper, by contrast, operated like a shadow, disabling high-end security and leaving behind a digital trail that even the FBI's top cyber units are struggling to follow. Despite the lack of a direct link, the Pima County Sheriff's Department has faced a wave of scrutiny over how an alleged predator like Reynolds was ever allowed to wear the uniform. Sheriff Chris Nanos has been forced to defend his department's integrity at a time when they should be focused entirely on the 13,000 tips that have flooded in since February. The Ozark Trail lead remains the most tangible piece of evidence, that 25-liter hiker pack sold at Walmart. Federal agents are meticulously tracking every sale of that specific model across Arizona and neighboring states, looking for a buyer who fits the ghost profile. They are searching for someone with the technical know-how to bypass a ring camera and the cold calculation to target the mother of one of the most famous women in America. The emotional weight of this investigation has now shifted back to Savannah Guthrie herself, who is preparing for a return to the Today Show on April 6th. Her return is described by colleagues as a bittersweet step forward, a way to reclaim her purpose while her heart remains in the Arizona desert. In a pre-taped interview with Hoda Kotb, Savannah admitted that the silence from her mother's captors is a unique kind of torture. There has been no proof of life, no verified second ransom demand since the February 5th deadline passed, and no sign of the Apple Watch Nancy was wearing when she was taken. Savannah's brother, Cameron, has remained in Tucson, acting as the family's liaison with the FBI, but even he has had to acknowledge the grim reality that the trail is growing colder with every sunset over the Catalina Foothills.
As we wrap up this look into the Nancy Guthrie case, we are left with a series of haunting questions and a family that refuses to give up hope. The arrest of Travis Reynolds may have removed one predator from the streets of Tucson, but the person who took Nancy Guthrie remains at large, possibly watching the very news reports we are producing. This case has exposed the terrifying vulnerability of our most cherished family members and the dark side of a world where fame can become a target. The Guthrie family has gained more than just a headline. They've gained a nationwide community of people who are now looking for an 84-year-old grandmother with a pacemaker and a story that isn't over yet. If you have any information regarding a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack or saw anything suspicious near East Skyline Drive on the night of January 31st, the FBI is still urging you to come forward. Your tip could be the one that brings Nancy home. Please share this video to keep her face in the public eye. It's the least we can do for a family that has given so much to our morning routines. Make sure to like and subscribe to stay updated as this high-stakes investigation continues to unfold. We will be here to cover every break in the case, no matter how long it takes. Nancy Guthrie was a teacher, a mother, and a pillar of her community. She deserves to be found, and her family deserves the truth. The desert is vast, but it cannot hide a secret forever. We will continue to follow the evidence from the digital pings in Rio Rico to the halls of justice in Pima County. Thank you for standing with the Guthrie family and for trusting us to bring you the facts. I am February. This is the February Report. Thank you for watching.